Let us jump into today. We got a very big topic. Get yourselves caffeinated. Get yourself some salad, a little nash. I want to dedicate tonight's class in loving memory of Daniel Mayer Newman, sponsored by Amy and Max Newman. Thank you for sponsoring such a beautiful course, such an amazing course, and the feedback has been so beautiful. So it's really gratifying. So beautiful to see that we're all enjoying this over here. So let's where are we holding right now? Let's do a little review over here. Just take out your timeline maps. Let's take a quick look at this over here. This is our 6th week of our journey. So we've covered a lot. We began on the left side of our map in the gray shaded box on the left, which was the Bible. That was lesson 1. We went through the 3 parts of the written Torah, the Nevi'im, the prophets, the Ketuvim, scripture, the written books. And we spoke generally in our first class about the relationship between the written Torah and the oral Torah. What does that mean? That on the one hand, we have scripture from God, and then all of a sudden Judaism is still flourishing and innovating. Hundreds, hello, Anna, come on in. And flourishing hundreds of years later, thousands of years later. In lesson 2, we explored the world of Midrash. That was lesson 2. That was the red bar. And that was the halachic Midrash, Agadic Midrash. Lesson 3, that was our Sunday morning. Right? Sunday morning. What time was that? Was that at 10:30? We met on Sunday? Yeah. It was 10:30, something like that, 10 o'clock. In Jewish family, that was a Talmud, yeah. We explored the Talmud. Lesson 4 was the world of halacha, Jewish law. Last week, lesson 5, Musar, Jewish ethics, and Hakira, Jewish philosophy. And dear friends, we are right now, lesson 6, the grand conclusion. And we are going to the most mysterious part of Torah, Kabbalah and Chasidism, which are towards the bottom over here. In the both of them are like teal color, greenish teal, turquoise bars over here, Kabbalah and Chasidism. And that will be our grand finale, the esoteric part of Torah, the mystical side of Torah, which is very misunderstood. And there's just a certain misunderstanding. What exactly is Kabbalah? What's not Kabbalah? And it's on the one hand so popular these days. You know, within the Jewish world, just the term Kabbalah has never been more popular than it is today. But at the same time, it's just so enigmatic. What does it really mean? So God willing, today we will do a deep dive into Kabbalah, into Hasidus. And if we have time, let's see how much of a taste of Kabbalah we could even do today. All right. So here we go. Let me ask you this question. If you had to define Kabbalah, what would you say Kabbalah is? Or what is your experience of Kabbalah? Or what does the term Kabbalah evoke for you? Or have you ever even done any Kabbalah? I want to hear from you. What do you say? No, nothing? No Kabbalah? No Madonna stuff? Never got into that shtick?
Close to zero.
Close to zero.
Perspective, for me, it was a different perspective than some of the things, the fundamental things, the way you do the Shekinah and things like that. Seems to me, and I don't know who about all, but I know that there's Shekinah maybe takes a higher, priority role or a stronger role. The idea of that, some other ideas.
Yeah, what was your exposure to Kabbalah? I'm just wondering.
Just reading and maybe reading about it, reading basically essays by Jewish mavens who said that people who are purport to explore Allah, that's in the Black Scars and other people, it's sort of silly. It's like trying to do, not my own metaphor, quantum physics before you even know basic mechanics. Right.
That's part of it. Right. So today it's also popular, but is it appropriate to even be going there so quickly?
What can they really learn if there's such a fundamental background of which they're ignorant?
Right. Okay, that's a good point. I'm going to talk about that. So that's good. Anything else? What do you guys say? Anything, right? Jewish mysticism, anything that's, law is law. And the stories are stories. And but anything that's mystical, anything. No, Gematria is not Kabbalah. Yeah, like the numbers, the number connections in Torah. That's not Kabbalah. Yeah. What else do you guys say? Yes.
I just don't learn this as like alphabet, like, about letters, what I never thought about this, what even like shape of this is letter, like it means something like Kabbalistic, like an idea, and I was so like surprised. What is
Right.
it? This one or this, it's everything, it's means something.
Everything has a meaning.
Yes.
So, what I thought it was before I ever met you, and what I think it is now are completely different things.
Okay.
What I think it is now is really the very deepest analysis of Torah, to find hidden things and, describing the energy of the universe and godly energy and the way it flows to all of us, and which is very different than the sort of, Madonna type of stuff.
I'll tell you honestly, I never actually read or saw anything from Madonna's type of Kabbalah. I actually wonder what it is, the Kabbalah Center stuff.
No,
It's not,
yeah, it just-
you're saying it's different than from the stuff that I teach, you're saying?
My view of it's a lot similar to Stewart's, is that, it's like trying to teach calculus to a child who doesn't know addition.
Right.
It's like you can say, oh, that does all this magic stuff, and
But you're losing the,
yeah, there's no ground in between to actually.
very good. That's true. So let's talk a little bit about Kabbalah, the mysticism, this enigmatic part of Torah, and what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us today? So this is the story. Kabbalah, as I said, is the mystical part of Torah. And in the Torah vernacular, the mystical parts of Torah come with two names. I want to explore these two names with you. Let's take a look at page 234. And the meaning of these two names is very, very telling. It's very important. What was that? Oh, yes, absolutely. There you go.
Oh, that's okay. There you go.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay.
Page 234. One name is Kabbalah. That's the more common name. And Kabbalah means received, tradition. Tradition means this is what has come down to us. That's number one. Kabbalah is tradition, received. It's very interesting that this is the only part of Torah that we refer to as the received tradition, even though really everything is received tradition. But Kabbalah specifically has that name. Kabbalah does not mean hocus pocus. Kabbalah doesn't mean mysticism. Kabbalah simply means that which we received. That's number one. And number two, which was more common term used for the mystical parts of Torah up until recently, was called sod, which in Hebrew means secret. That's number two. Sod, which is a secret. Which means, let's put these two together. Kabbalah is received secrets. So let's start unpacking these two ideas. Number one, Kabbalah is received. Number two, Kabbalah are secrets. So that just makes Kabbalah even more exciting, right? It's mysterious, it's a secret. And then what are we doing over here if it's a secret, right? Is a cat out of the bag today in the 21st century? Okay. So number one, what is Kabbalah? One of the first premises that we've introduced in this course is that the Torah is multi-layered. Every mitzvah, every verse in the Torah, when you look at it and see the simple meaning of it, that is only the outer surface. But just like an onion, you could peel back one layer and another layer and another layer, and there's another sphere under there. The same exact thing is true with every single part of Torah. There's the outer layer, which we call the simple meaning, and even the simple meaning could have multiple layers. But then you start peeling back layers, and every layer is something new to tell you. You could look at a given verse from the midrashic perspective, and even from within the midrashic perspective. There'd be multiple layers to go through. And the Talmud tells us that minimum, just on a general level, there are 70 different facets to the Torah. Easily, you take any verse, any word, any letter in the Torah, any mitzvah, you could explore it on 70 different levels. But just like as an onion, you peel back, and then eventually you get to the core. And there's nothing more to peel. This is the center of the onion. Kabbalah is that ultimate core layer. This is the innermost element of the Torah. It's very spiritual. You could even say it's very detached. It's the most outer layer is the most practical, the most relevant, the most down to earth. The deeper you go, the more spiritual it gets. And the way we understand it, the way it was taught is that the Torah exists on every single level. When God created the world, the Torah relates to every single layer of reality, which is why we even have God's wisdom that speaks about law, criminal law. But every part of Torah also exists on a spiritual world, in its more sublime reality. I know it's a little bit hard to relate to this concept, but the Torah relates on a deeper layer in spiritual worlds. And Kabbalah teaches you the Torah on that layer, on the layer, the way the Torah is on a spiritual reality. So the Kabbalah opens up to you a world that we don't recognize, the spiritual reality, which is the true reality, which is beyond our physical reality. We know a physical life. We know physical reality. Kabbalah gives you a view, a bird's eye view from God's perspective, from the spiritual reality. And it opens up to us all these types of mystical and secret understanding. What exactly is God? How did God create the world? What's God's relationship with the world? Even just that question, what was the spiritual process of creation? What is a soul? How do souls work? What does it mean to have a soul? What is a mitzvah? What is the spiritual effect of a mitzvah? As well as a spiritual interpretation of every single part of Judaism. You could read a story in the Torah, and it's just a story, there's a great big flood. There's Noah, there's Adam, there's Eve, there's people, there's stories, there's drama. But Kabbalah opens up to all of a sudden, no, there's very mystical things happening over here. Why did this happen this way? Why was the flood 40 days? And everything is a window into the source code, which is very complex and very mysterious. It's a whole different world, Kabbalah. So the reason why we call Kabbalah the received tradition is because you can't make this stuff up, or you can't discover it. Or in other words, there's no proof for it. It's not philosophical ideas. It's not things that we could rationalize about. That's Jewish philosophy. Kabbalah are things that there's no proof for, and you can't have a proof for. I'll just tell you, as a rabbi, if I got a dime, I wouldn't be rich, but if I got a dime, every time I introduced a mystical concept in a class, and somebody would say, how do we know this? What's the proof? Whenever it's about a mystical concept, the answer is there is no proof. How could you prove that this is the way the soul works? How could you prove that we have two souls, a godly soul and an animal soul? Who said? Could you put the body under an MRI scan and get the spiritual DNA? Who said this? Who said that? And the answer is one word. Kabbalah. It's received. This is what we were told. You can't make it up unless you know it, you're privy to it, or if God communicated it to you. So that's the first truth about Kabbalah. Kabbalah are teachings that are beyond the human mind to innovate, and they were given from God to Moses. That's where Kabbalah comes from. Kabbalah is God communicating to the Jews, and specifically to Moses, spiritual truths into the mechanics of reality. And these are not things that we could explore with our own human tools. That's the first idea. So Kabbalah is true to tradition in a certain way more than any other part of Torah. Every other part of Torah, we could use our own human creativity to develop, to think through, to innovate within, which is indeed the whole story of Torah. We're innovating within Torah. Jewish law is developing because we were given the tools. That's the relationship. Kabbalah is already beyond the human ability to develop and even to understand. A lot of Kabbalah is totally beyond our grasp. And I want to say over here, I guess there's a little bit of a word of caution. Unfortunately, today, there's a lot of pseudo Kabbalah out there, like Madonna's Kabbalah. And there's somebody once told me they bought a Kabbalah book, and I saw she showed me what the book was. And it was very disheartening because somebody writes a book. They say that they call it Jewish Kabbalah. I don't even know if the author is Jewish. I could, all the telltale signs were there. This was not true to tradition. It says, it's not right. Here's somebody who wants to explore Jewish mysticism, and what do they get? Some book which is it's not true to our tradition. As Jews, especially when it comes to the mystical teachings, we want to make sure that we're getting authentic ideas. So that's literally in the name. Kabbalah means this is tradition. Full tradition. It has to be true to tradition. It has to be true to the Torah of Moses. It has to be true to Jewish tradition. And you could sense it. It's very easy to sense. Who's the author? Who's publishing this? What are the ideas that this book is trying that this book is promoting? So that's the first name. Kabbalah, at its very essence, is simply the received traditions. Comes straight from God, and that's what it is. The second name of Kabbalah is Sod, which means secrets. And this is another very important part of Kabbalah. The Torah in general was revealed to the Jews. God gave Moses the Torah on Mount Sinai. Moses teaches it to the Jews. The Jews are empowered to develop the Torah, Midrash, Halacha, Talmud. This is all the effort of the Jews throughout the ages to unpack the wisdom and the guidance and the direction of the Torah. But then there is the mysticism, the Kabbalah, the Sod, the secrets. Jews always knew the secrets existed. But the Jews always knew this is off limits. If you're the regular Jew, like me and you, and I'm absolutely putting myself out of the category of the select few who were taught Kabbalah, everybody knew there's something called the Torah's Hasod, the teachings of Torah which are secret. But nobody knew what they were. Nobody had a clue. Moses taught it to a select few, and throughout the ages, everybody knew the great sages know the Kabbalistic secrets. We don't. It's a secret. There's a secretive element surrounded around Kabbalah, and I'm going to tell you soon why. We're going to explore a little bit why. Why did it have to be a secret? Why can't we know? What's the problem? Okay, so let's read our first text for tonight. Maimonides speaks about Kabbalah. Text 1, let's begin with on my right side, Max. We'll start with you. Text 1, page 235. Here goes Maimonides.
As you are well aware, even the Talmud, which was received by tradition, was not originally committed to writing in a book that was disseminated to the people. Now, care was taken to avoid writing the oral Torah in a book accessible to all because of the disadvantages in such a system. Certainly then, no portion of the esoteric teachings of Torah could be written, which would divulge these teachings to everyone. Rather, these teachings were orally communicated by a few uniquely qualified individuals to other uniquely qualified individuals. As I earlier explained the saying, the secrets of the Torah can only be entrusted to the skilled sages. Nothing but a few remarks in allusion to these teachings are to be found in the Talmud and the Midrashim. They are like small kernels enveloped in many husks, so that the reader is generally occupied with the husk without thinking that it encloses a kernel.
There you go. This is Maimonides' description of Kabbalah. Secretive teachings. Okay. Now, so this is who was saying this earlier. You were saying this, Stuart, and Max was saying this, that part of the reason why they were secretive is because they're very advanced. And you have to have a certain appreciation for very deep ideas, for very subtle ideas, and for ideas that maybe you could even play with your mind. And you need to have a certain capacity, a certain depth and breadth of mind to be able to handle these types of delicate and touchy ideas, touchy subjects. So in certain communities, it was known there's for sure no touching Kabbalah until you're 40 years old. And it wasn't just 40 years old. Have you ever heard of that before? That the age was 40? And it wasn't only 40. It couldn't just be happened. That meant you spent the past 40 years studying Torah properly. This is what the Talmud says. There's no studying the secrets of the Torah until you filled your belly. That's the wording of the Talmud. Until you filled your belly with the other parts of Torah. Know Talmud very well. Be very familiar with Judaism, and then maybe you're in the right frame of mind to study the teachings of Kabbalah, and you could take it properly. And if you don't do it, best case scenario, you're just not gonna be able to understand it. Worst case scenario, you're going to misunderstand the ideas, and they could corrupt your belief, they could corrupt understanding, and we'll get to that in a moment. So that was the first idea. It was secretive. Okay. But today it's not a secret anymore. Today you could go to any Jewish bookstore and you could buy the books of Kabbalah. And even many of these books are translated into English. So you could even read the English translation. I believe it was the late 1800s already that Sonsino in England published the very first, does that make sense? Late 1800s, maybe early 1900s? Something tells me from late 1800s that Sonsino Press in England, in London, published an English translation of the Zohar, the classical work of Kabbalah. So today you could get an English Zohar. Is it a secret today? It's probably not a secret anymore. The real truth is no. Some secrets are only a secret because nobody told you this piece of information yet. Then there are certain secrets that even if you read it in a book, it's still a secret. It's still beyond you. Kabbalah was written with a certain built-in security system. Kabbalah was not written explicitly. The entire Kabbalah and the entire Zohar is written in code words. It's code. Even if you try reading it, you'll never understand it, which is a very good thing. Only those who are supposed to understand it get it. If not, read it, no problem. It can't do any harm, it can't do any good. And it's impossible to understand. Everything is written in codes, everything's riddles. And this was because this is very sensitive information. And this is what this was the proper way that Kabbalah was preserved through the ages. Okay. Yes.
Could an English translation even represent a shadow of the original?
Should we do a little taste? Let's do a little taste. I'll jump to right now. I want to do it now with you. Funny you should ask. Let's take a little quote from the Zohar, and I'll tell you in a moment. We're jumping a little bit the gun over here, but that's fine. We'll read a little bit from the Zohar, and you'll tell me if how much we're comprehending over here. Let's go to text 5 on page 248. All right, a few pages. We're gonna get back to the stuff before, but we'll move things around a little bit over here. Text 5. And let's read this very nice and slowly. Let's take it in, and then we'll discuss. So Lewis, text 5, page 248.
At the beginning of the manifestation of the king's will, the lamp of darkness engraved engravings of the supernal purity. It emanated from the most concealed of all concealed things, from the secret of endlessness. A formless vapor was inserted into a circle that was neither white nor black, nor red nor green, nor any color at all. When he began its measurements, he created bright colors to shine forth. From within the center of the lamp, a fountain spouted, for which the colors down below were beneath.
This is a translation from the Zohar, volume 1, page 15a. And it's describing how God created the world. Sounds good, Lewis? Let's go create a world now. We know exactly what to do. So you got the recipe. You got to need a lamp of darkness. You got to do some engravings. Formless vapor. You tell me, do you even have a starting point to decode what's happening over here? You say no. Anybody say yes? I'm going to give it a shot?
Yes,
Go for it.
but if I compare it to what we know today from science, then I don't want to say that, but I compare things to science and how everything began, how the universe began, and how life came to be.
So you're saying so you're getting a little bit of like a vague idea maybe about darkness and light.
Like from the most conceived.
So we have a lamp of darkness, and then from within the center of the lamp, a fountain spouted, and then colors were painted. Okay, so dear friends, this text is written in code. If you don't know the code, you can break your head open. And you could think, you could start convincing yourself you think what it says, but you need real study. The deepest secrets of God, of God's relationship with the world, but how the world operates on a spiritual level are in this text. We could do a whole class on this text and we'll just begin getting a little bit of a glimpse of an appreciation of what it's saying over here. So this is an example over here. So if we have time, maybe I'll do that in a half hour. This is an example of how there's the Zohar Kabbalah is not just a secret because it wasn't taught. It's inherently a secret. It's innately a secret. It's totally beyond. Okay. But now my question for you is why the secrecy? Why, what's the big deal? Tell people mysticism. Let the Jews have mysticism. Why the secrecy? And the answer is because if you study Kabbalah without proper preparation, without proper training, without proper mentorship, it could be dangerous. It'd be dangerous, which means it plays with your mind. It hurts your perspective on life. It's just very delicate ideas that could really hurt a Jew's grounding. And it has to be done properly. The Talmud even says Kabbalah cannot be taught to more than 2 people at a time. Very interesting. It's you need a real mentorship, somebody who understands the sensitivity for it. The Baal Shem Tov, which we're talking about the Baal Shem Tov a little bit soon in today's class. The Baal Shem Tov said there's a danger of studying Kabbalah. If somebody doesn't know how to remove concepts from their physical description, we're talking about purely spiritual concepts here. The moment that you start visualizing it, you're already in deep trouble. You could start thinking it could lead you to heretical beliefs. It's sensitive ideas. I know I'm just talking a little bit about it. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I'll leave it at that. If you ever read academic Kabbalah, the world of academia trying to explore Kabbalah, you see this happening. You see a total misunderstanding of ideas, and the world of academia thinks that they got it. And then they explore what's Jewish theology based on their totally warped understanding of cryptic Kabbalistic texts. They don't have tradition, and they just, they think that they're smart. The world of academia.
Reminds me, you said before that it's, let them read it, no harm.
Right.
But, the lawyers in the room will tell you that people read the Constitution and think they understand it, but no grounding in it whatsoever. You have these things called sovereign citizen movement and that kind of thing, where people think that they know more than everybody else.
Right. They've read a text and now they know things.
They can argue with you, over what it means when they're merely spouting babble.
Right. It's 100% what it is. And it's so this was the Jewish tradition. From Moses, Kabbalah was protected. Now, what's the danger? The Talmud gives us a cautionary tale about the dangers of Kabbalah. Okay, so let's read this next text. Let's go back to text 2, page 236. Toby. And these are 4 sages who dabbled in Kabbalistic teachings in the world of Kabbalah. And let's see what happened over here. So Toby, page 236.
4 sages entered the orchard. Then Azai, then Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. Then Azai looked and died. And Zoma looked and went mad. Acher cut down the planting, i.e. became a heretic. Rabbi Akiva entered in wholeness and peace, and emerged in wholeness and peace.
Okay, 4 sages, great sages. Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, we'll be reading about Ben Zoma in the Seder. Acher was his nickname. His name was Elisha ben Avuya. And Rabbi Akiva, who's better known. These 4 were great sages. When they read the text that we just read, they actually understood what it's saying. And they went into the orchard. Orchard is a code word for entering into the secret garden of the secrets of the Torah. Okay. Great sages, yet 3 out of 4 were severely damaged by the experience. What happens? Ben Azai looks and dies. He was totally overwhelmed by what he was experiencing, by what he was seeing, by what he was understanding, that his soul could not be contained in the body anymore. There was just such a shock to the soul, such an excitement or such an overwhelmingness of spiritual truth, of spiritual reality, that the soul departed from the body. That sounds scary, huh? He died on the spot. Okay. Ben Zoma looked and went mad. Ben Zoma was understanding things, and his mind could not contain, could not assimilate what he was seeing, what he was comprehending. So he snapped. He went mad. Acher, who was a sage, Elisha ben Avuya, saw things, he couldn't properly grasp it. He lost his faith and he became a heretic. The word Acher means a different person. He became unrecognizable overnight. He became a total heretic, from a great sage to somebody who became a total heretic. Rabbi Akiva was the only one who entered in peace and emerged in peace. So we have to understand, what's going on over here. Ideas that are this potent, that they could mess with your brain, mess with your faith, mess with your life. If any of you feel tonight that one of these 3 symptoms are starting to happen, just make a dash for the exit sign. Okay, but the point is that authentic Kabbalah, for good reason, was kept under lock and key. And this was always the Jewish understanding of it. That these are the most potent ideas in the world. And they have to be safeguarded. They have to, on the one hand, be kept in tradition, but in a safe way. Okay, so that's a general overview of Kabbalah. Now let's go through a little bit of the history of the evolution and the development of Kabbalah, because this is a very important part of the Torah. Okay, number 1, where does Kabbalah come from? I mentioned before the world of academia. The world of academia will tell you that Kabbalah was an invention from the 13th century, like a total innovation by some rabbis in Spain or in Germany, and Kabbalah they kind of made it up in the 13th century. Okay. For some reason, the world of academia, they have like this tick that anything of Jewish tradition, they love knocking and saying, no, it's not true. Now, every other citizen's, every other society's history, that's their history. But Jewish history, the Yiddish word is fargin. You know what fargin means? How do you translate fargin, Toby? Fargin. They can't let it be. The world of academia always challenges, the Jewish narrative, the traditional narrative. Kabbalah, is not a made-up thing. Kabbalah, first of all, we have the earliest sources of Kabbalah in the Torah, in the Bible. So let's look at our map over here. We're going to start going through page 238. Let's start with the early Kabbalistic texts. There are many, many Kabbalistic references in the Bible, in the prophets. There are prophecies. And primarily, there's the vision of the chariot. The prophet Ezekiel has a vision of the divine chariot, of the Merkava. And that is the very first, that is the seed of many Kabbalistic understandings of the spiritual worlds, of the spiritual systems that God put into place, into reality. So we already have a biblical source to Kabbalah. Then there are these early works of Kabbalah, very early works. We have in the year 40, there's a book that's called the Book of Brilliance, Sefer HaBahir. Very cryptic text, totally incomprehensible to, unless you're really a true sage. And tradition says that this was authored by Abraham. Abraham himself authored this book, Sefer HaBahir, the Book of Brilliance, which is a tremendous amount. Over here it says it's attributed to the sage Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, but some say that it even predates him and that these were the teachings of Abraham. Absolutely cryptic, totally not understandable. Then you have, in the year 100 CE, Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. Oh, sorry, this is the one that's attributed to Abraham. I apologize. Sefer Yetzirah is attributed to Abraham. This tells us about how God created the world. Very, very mysterious, very, very not. And then we have the big classic. In the year 150, we have the Zohar. The Zohar is, in a certain way, the Bible of Kabbalah. This is the source text. This is where everything is at. The Zohar was authored by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great sage, in the year 150 CE. 150 CE is the era of the Mishnah. So at the very same time that the Mishnah is being put down to paper for the very first time, the mystical teachings as well are being recorded in a separate work called the Zohar. Now, unlike the Mishnah, which was made available to all Jews, and all Jews had copies of the Mishnah, studied the Mishnah, this was Kabbalah, so it was kept secret. So there's this manuscript that only great sages have, but Jews only know that it exists, and maybe not even. And this becomes a source text of Kabbalah. Now, the Zohar is also very cryptic, like we just read. We just read from the Zohar. The Zohar is also not organized. It's not like a book that begins with chapter 1, and then there's chapter 2, and there's a storyline, and there's a progression of ideas, and chapter 1 leads into chapter 2, etc. The Zohar is just a book of a bunch of eclectic teachings and sayings, and it's in no particular order. You can't really make heads and tails of a theology, of a philosophy, of an ideology of Kabbalah. It's all over the place. So you have this book that's absolutely cryptic, totally unorganized. It's all over the place. It's essentially a closed book, as I mentioned, even if you try studying it. There's no organized, and the ideas are not explained. The ideas are not given a form. It's a very source code type of book. Now, here's the very interesting thing. The Zohar is written down in the year 150 CE. But it took over 1,000 years until the Zohar is officially published. In the 13th century, there was a sage, a great Kabbalist, who lived in Spain. His name was Rabbi Moshe de Leon. Rabbi Moshe de Leon was the first sage who got a manuscript of the Zohar and published it. And said, this is our mystical traditions. And he was scared that the book is going to be lost forever. So he made the decision to publish it. Until Rabbi Moshe de Leon in the 13th century published the Zohar, nobody ever had it. Now, as soon as he did this, there was a very big controversy in the Jewish world. Is this really the 1,000 plus year old mystical book from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Or maybe Rabbi Moshe de Leon made this up. You know, if I come around and say, you know what, I just found a manuscript from George Washington. This is George Washington's book. Only I have it. You probably, want to take it with a few big grains of salt. And that's kind of what happened when Rabbi Moshe de Leon publishes the Zohar. Jews always know that we have secrets, but where is it? Nobody knows. And all of a sudden he says, I'll publish it. But the great sages of the time, this is in the 1200s, review the book and authenticate it and say, yes, this is actually our tradition. This is the secrets of the Torah. One of the interesting ways how they authenticated it, because they saw quotes from this new text, from the Zohar, that were quoted by the sages who were writing books 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in the 8th century, in the 9th century, in the 10th century, in the 11th century. So they had access to this text. They were quoting this text, but nobody knew what they were quoting. And over here, they saw. So today in the world of academia, this is not, the world of academia says that the Zohar was made up by Moshe de Leon in the 13th century. But that is not at all the Jewish consensus. The Jewish consensus, the Jewish scholars they were skeptical about this. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't a piece of fraud, but they authenticated it, and that's the Jewish traditional understanding. This is indeed the hidden, lost work that comes from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the source text of Jewish mysticism. So for the very first time, the Jews have access to the written form of Kabbalah. Now, one last comment before we keep on moving on. The Zohar itself makes it clear that even though right now, and the Zohar is being written down in the year 150, 2,000 years ago, the Zohar says, even though right now all these teachings are being kept secret, there's gonna be a time when these teachings are gonna have to open up be open to the public. When? It's cryptic when, but okay. But this starts in the 13th century. The Zohar is published like that; it never gets lost. Maimonides, you should know, writes that the Zohar got lost. Maimonides did not have this manuscript. There are some indicators that towards the end of his life, he did get a hold of this manuscript. But Maimonides was not privy to Kabbalah, at least earlier on in his life. And he believed it was lost forever. You know, if only a few dozen people have access to a book, eventually what happens? It's gonna, your chances are too low. But Rabbi Moshe de Leon goes ahead, publishes it, and this creates a new renaissance of the study of Kabbalah amongst the sages. So let's continue in our map over here. We enter into the era of the medieval Kabbalists. And over here are just some important names. Notably, we have over here Nachmanides. Nachmanides wrote many, many works. It was very prolific. But he is one of the first people who introduced the Kabbalistic interpretation in his commentary on the Torah, as well as many others that go on in the next few hundred years in the 13th or 14th century. But here we come to the 16th century, to the Sapphic Kabbalists. And this is the next page over here, right? Page 240. Safat in the 1500s, northern Israel, Safed becomes a center of mystics. Mystics is a term that's used for the great sages who had access and studied and immersed themselves in the mystical teachings of the Zohar and of Kabbalah. And they create a renaissance. Something very interesting happens here in Safat. So let's go through a few names, and then I'm going to show you what happens over here. So number one, we have here on the top, in the year 1530, we have Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz. Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz was a very, very important person because he was a teacher of many influential Kabbalists that follow him. Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz is probably better known for authoring and writing the Lichadodi prayer that is sung in synagogues every single Friday night. Lichadodi is a Kabbalistic text. Okay. Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz, one of his students, let's go down, in the year 1533, one of his students is Rabbi Yosef Cairo. Do you remember Rabbi Yosef Cairo's name? Who's Rabbi Yosef Cairo? The Shulchan Aruch, the author of Jewish law, who is a legalist. Is that the proper term? A legalist or a there's a better word I'm looking for. Like a codifier, what? A legislator, jurist. He's a man of law. He was also a major Kabbalist. So he's a major, which is also very interesting. You see over here the connection. That Kabbalah is not this isolated mystical hocus pocus stuff. It integrates part of the Jewish tradition. But then we have right next to him in the year 1550 is the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. And then we also have in the year 1570 the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. These are 16th century Kabbalists. They are the first ones that take Kabbalah, take these teachings which are so terse and so unorganized and so not explained that are in the Zohar, and they start writing books that codify these teachings and organize these teachings. And they did what Maimonides did to Jewish law. Take all the teachings, organize it, explain it, create an encyclopedia. So the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, he wrote a book, which is like 25 volumes, very prolific, that is an encyclopedia of Kabbalah. The Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who in Judaism, we call him the Arizal HaKadosh. What does HaKadosh mean? The holy. There's only three people. There's only three people in all of Jewish tradition that we add the appellation HaKadosh. The Arizal HaKadosh, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, which actually he was also a Kabbalist, the Or HaChaim, and the Shalah HaKadosh, which is also, he authored a work of Kabbalah. Only three people that is accepted throughout the entire Jewish world. They deserve the title HaKadosh. The Ari was a teacher of Kabbalah. More than being a teacher of Kabbalah, he gave a form to Kabbalah. He took ideas of Kabbalah that weren't given definitions, they weren't given terms, they weren't given a structure, and he structured them. He created a model of how to understand teachings that didn't even have a framework for the human mind to assimilate them. So the teachings of the Zohar are so beyond description that they didn't even have a form. The Ari gives a form, and the Ari says something that changes the Jewish understanding of Kabbalah. The Arizal wrote, until now, Kabbalah had to remain a secret. From here and on, he wrote mutar, it's permitted, mitzvah, and it's an obligation, legalot zot hachachma, to reveal this wisdom. He decided that the wisdom of Kabbalah has to start the process of seeping into the Jewish consciousness, and start seeping into the streams of Torah. And that is exactly what happens following the Arizal. Continuing on, we have the post-Safavidian Kabbalists and schools. And what starts happening over here is, one of the most important players in this was the Maharal of Prague in the year 1600. The Maharal, Rabbi Yehuda Lowy, the chief rabbi of Prague, he starts taking ideas of Kabbalah, and for the first time, he's starting to teach Judaism. He's starting to write books of Judaism that start incorporating Kabbalistic wisdom into the thought process, which was very revolutionary. And this starts a pattern. The Shalah in the year 1624, Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, if you know any Horowitzes, good chance they are a grandson of Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, writes the Shalah, a Kabbalistic text, a critical Kabbalistic text, where all of a sudden the ideas of Kabbalah are being used as a way to help explain Judaism, and this divide between all of Judaism and Kabbalah in post-Safavidian Kabbalah is starting to open. But at the same time, Kabbalah is still the genre of scholars. Everybody knows it's still kind of off limits. And even though the Arizal said we have to start revealing this wisdom, it's still a closed book. One of the key moments, how many times did I say the key moments? Yeah, I said it a lot of times already, but there's a lot of key moments. Okay, there you go. Okay, there's a lot of key moments. So for our purposes, the most important revolution in Kabbalah happens in the year 1734 with the advent of Chasidism, the Hasidic movement. And the Hasidic movement, based upon Kabbalah, starts really taking Kabbalistic concepts and pushing them out into the domain of simple Jews, of the regular Jews, that they should study these ideas, have access to these ideas in a way that is palatable for them, in a way that is safe for them, but at the same time, they can access the energy and the power, the potency of Kabbalistic teachings. The Baal Shem Tov said he was against people studying raw Kabbalah. He says it's just not healthy. But at the same time, what did the Baal Shem Tov do? He created a model, which is called Chasidus, which takes the teachings of Kabbalah, the most deepest parts of Kabbalah, and says, I'll share it with you. You could learn this. And it's safe. It's packaged in a way that's safe for you to digest. And instead of harming you, it's going to help you. And then we have what we call Chasidus. Take a look at your maps, at your big maps over here. And I want you to take specifically a look at the genre called Chasidism. What you'll notice is every other genre of Torah has at least some texts that bring you back to the era of the original sages in the time of the Mishnah. And then following time of the Mishnah, there's always in every single era, somebody is writing books, and these are not even all the books, these are just the key books. Hasidism is the only genre of Torah that there is nothing. A genre of Torah called Hasidus does not exist until the mid-1700s. Which is quite fascinating. There's a part of Torah that literally was, nobody had it until recent Jewish history, very recent Jewish times. And a lot of people wonder, what does that even mean? You know, there's no precedence. Everything has a precedence. Kabbalah, we have an original work that comes from the times of the Mishnah, the Zohar. Hasidus is nothing. So what is Hasidus? What exactly is Hasidus? What exactly are Hasidic teachings? Some people think that Hasidus is Kabbalah, and it's not true. That Hasidus is Kabbalah. Yeah, it's Kabbalah explained. Like, what's the Tanya? Yeah, Tanya is Kabbalah explained. But the real truth is, it's not true at all. Chasidus is not a subgenre of Kabbalah. What is Chasidus? So let me tell you what Chasidus is. One of the great commentaries on the Torah, he lived in the 12th century. His name was, he's referred to as the Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Avraham Ibn Ezra, a Spanish sage, Sephardi sage. He wrote a brilliant commentary on the Torah, a real classic. And he wrote an introduction. In his introduction, he just writes about his methodology, really beautiful words, how he studies, the love that he feels towards Torah studying, really, really beautiful. He writes there in his introduction that there are 4 dimensions to Torah. Generally speaking, there's 4 domains of Torah. There's a simple meaning, there's the allusions, there's the midrash, there's the sod, there are the secrets, the Kabbalah. Then he says, that's what Ibn Ezra writes. There's a 5th dimension of the Torah, but we don't know what it is. We know that it exists, but we don't know what it is. It is the dimension of the Torah that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes, in the Messianic era. And he says, this is called the teachings of Mashiach, the teachings that represent the Messianic era, and we don't have it. So Jews always knew that there's another dimension of Torah that has not been revealed at all. What is that dimension? A 5th dimension of Torah, which today we refer to as Chasidus. So what is Chasidus? And what does that mean that all of a sudden in the 1700s, before the Messiah came, right? There's no Messiah in the 1700s. All of a sudden, these teachings are starting to come out into the open, the teachings of Chasidus, this 5th dimension of the Torah. So I'll tell you a little bit about Chasidus, and then I'll tell you why Chasidus emerged in the 1700s. Chasidus, on the one hand, is a new genre of Torah. It is not Kabbalah. It doesn't fit into any of the other genres, but at the same time, it's not really its own genre. It is everything else in a whole new light. Kabbalah teaches that there are 5 levels to the soul. And so too, there are 5 levels to the soul. There are 5 levels to the Torah. The highest level of the soul is the essence of the soul. If you have to get to the very point of the soul, that's the top layer. Chasidus is that. Okay. So what is Chasidus? Chasidus, on the one hand, is everything else. There's Kabbalah in Chasidus. There's Musar in Chasidus. There's philosophy in Chasidus. There's law in Chasidus. But in a whole new light, in a way that you see it and you appreciate it in a whole different way. And all of a sudden, a piece of Talmud that everybody learned one way, there's a whole new appreciation to all of Torah. That's the energy of Chasidus. Why was Chasidus revealed in the 1730s by the Baal Shem Tov? Let me give you a little bit of the history over here. We'll talk a little bit about this. I want to tell you a little bit about Jewish history in the 17th century, the 1600s. All right, let's go from 1600 to 1700 or to 1699. Jewish history always has ups and downs, the bumps in the road, turbulence. Darkest time of Jewish history is really, it's like the Dark Ages. It's from the year 1600 to 1700. Hands down, this was the worst time for Jewish life, and I'm especially talking about in Europe. What's happening over here? There were a bunch of different circumstances that all came together that just broke and shattered the Jewish spirit to the point that Jewish life came pretty close, not to death, but close to death. The Jewish life was lifeless. It was, if there was ever a time where the Jewish spirit was really crushed, and you could really ask, is there a future? Is there a Jewish future after this? It happened in the late 1600s. What happened? there was a certain erosion of the Jewish spirit. There was an erosion of Jewish life. Jewish life is meant to be passionate. Jewish life is meant to be joyful. Jewish life is, even song. The idea that Jews sing. Today, every Jew sings. Every synagogue sings. Who doesn't sing in a synagogue? Even the most dispassionate Jewish community, they still sing songs. You sing by the Seder. And song is really an ancient part of Judaism. In the Holy Temple, they would sing songs. They had their bands. It was part of the divine service. The Jews stopped singing. Song was lost from Jewish life. What was happening? The Jews of Europe, especially Poland, Jews lived in Poland, in the Polish kingdom. I believe it was by then it was called the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And Poland, today, Poland is a little corner of Europe. Back then, Poland, the kingdom of Poland, the Polish kingdom, was the center of Europe. It was a whole Central Europe and Western Europe. It was Poland of today. It was Lithuania of today. It was Western Russia. It was all of Ukraine. It was all of Austria. It was Germany. What else am I missing? It was where did Jews live? It was Poland. Jews lived in Poland for hundreds of years. It was a golden era of Poland. 1600s came to a point that Jews, number one, were very, very illiterate. The whole idea of Jews being knowledgeable and Jews having access to Jews were very simple. There was a certain beauty to the Jewish spirit. We're not talking about Jews who were disconnected from Judaism. They loved Judaism. There's a certain simplicity and beauty to their simplicity, to their illiteracy. But Jews weren't able to study. They weren't even able to read. They were barely able to pray. This was the nature of Jewish life. What happened was there became a very big divide, like a class divide, between the Jews who were knowledgeable, scholarly, and the Jews who were very illiterate. And there was this very big schism. It was extremes. It was polars. Either you were part of the class that was educated and scholarly, or you were very, very stupid. Also, at this point, if you look in Jewish history, the 1600s, there's a total lack of Jewish leadership. Who are the leaders? Who are the greats who are writing Jewish books, who are giving inspiration to the Jews? There's nobody. There's a total void of real, healthy leadership. And what happened was the not good players, people who did not deserve to be Jewish leaders, people who did not deserve to be rabbis, ended up becoming rabbis. And there was this very negative stigma in the air that the majority of Jews felt disconnected. They were scorned by the scholars. You don't know anything. And Jews felt very disconnected. The whole idea of a Jew feeling close to God, God cares about me, God loves me, that was gone. Jews didn't feel that. It was also a part of Jewish, it was part of the Jewish fabric of life then, which we can't even imagine, but this just became part of this, in this void, in this total vacuum of a healthy Jewish lifestyle. One of the things that developed was small Jewish communities couldn't really afford a rabbi. It was a little shtetla, these little cities, little hamlets. Like you see in Fiddler on the Roof. The rabbi in Fiddler on the Roof looks like a bigger imbecile than the whole town put together. No? Saying, and the whole Fiddler on the Roof is a very weird a caricature representation of Jews. I'm saying makes us all look very stupid or something. but rabbis, they maybe weren't even that knowledgeable themselves. So there was something, part of Jewish life then was something called preachers, magidim, a magid, preachers. But today, synagogues have rabbis and cantors, no preachers. The preachers then, when they would travel from city to city, and they would go to Jewish communities and they say, "I'm a big rabbi. I could preach to you. I could teach you. I could give a sermon here in the town." And they would say, "What's your price?" Okay, you give them the price, and if the town was able to put together the money, they would pay this preacher, this rabbi, to come and speak from the pulpit. And these preachers created an environment that, instead of speaking words of encouragement and words of empowerment and words of inspiration, there's a very negative energy in the air. And they would speak down at the simple Jews. And they would say, "You're an embarrassment to God. You're a shanda because you don't know anything and you don't study Talmud. and you don't even know what you're doing, and you don't do any of the mitzvahs right because you can't even study, and you're all going to hell, all this type of stuff. And these simple Jews, very sincere people, they would cry. And all the preachers felt the more people cry, the more of a success it is. This is what people were paying money for. Like this, people thought this was Judaism. And if somebody faints, that's even better. I'm saying this was literally what was happening. The preachers would go around and preach this very ugly version of God. God doesn't like you. God's embarrassed of you. People felt very distant from God, very cold. And this was Jewish life. This was literally Jewish life, a very, very disconnected version of Judaism. And somehow this is just what became the fabric of day-to-day Jewish life. People did not feel close to God. It was very uninspiring, but this was Jewish life. Part of what happened was, I'm not going to go too much into the history of it, but basically back then, to be a rabbi in these little, Poland was divided by nobilities. It was called what's the word I'm looking for? They were divided by like a serfs, or not serfs, but like but what was that? It was a pirate. So it was a landowner. Somebody owned a whole piece of land, and they were like a nobility. What was that? A lord, yeah. And they basically owned everything, and they rented everything out to everybody else. So nobody owned anything. So the Jews didn't own the taverns. The Jews rented out the taverns and had to pay a monthly fee to the landowner, to this nobility. Okay. In any case, where are we going with all this? Jews are not doing good. What happened was these nobilities, they were in charge of who's the clergy in their little domain. And you were able to bribe them. So bad players, these people who didn't belong being leaders of the Jewish people, they would bribe, and they would kick out the people who deserved to be rabbis because they wanted to have the position. And they wanted to get the stipend or whatever that you would get paid from in Poland. So what happened was all the good people, all the good rabbis got chased out of town. All the bad players who were just taking advantage of the simple Jews, they're the ones who bribed their way into it. So it wasn't a good situation. Then what happens is the year 1648, the year 1649. 1648, 1649, 2 years, a little bit less than 2 years. There was something called the Chmielnicki pogroms. These were the years that the Cossacks came from Ukraine and fought against, they were looking for independence. They fought against the Polish nobility, the Polish kingdom. So really, they were going after the nobility. They were going after the kingdom. What the Cossacks realized was that in Poland, there were big castles. If you wanted to fight the kings, it wasn't so simple. So what do you do if you can't fight the kings? Go and fight the Jews. That's what happened. The Cossacks, we're talking about an army of thousands and thousands of soldiers on horses. They were led by their chieftain, whose name was Bogdan Chmielnicki. Unfortunately, today, it's still in Ukraine. They worship Chmielnicki. They idolize him. Chmielnicki led the Jews. Chmielnicki led the Cossack army on a 2-year-long pogrom against the Jewish community in Poland. He went from southern Poland to the north, village to village. They walked in. By the time the sun set, every Jewish head was disconnected from the body. Systematically, very brutal, savagely, in a very disgusting way. And it happened very quickly. What he did was he came to a city, gathered all the Jews, and every single Jew, one at a time, was given the ultimatum: convert right now to Christianity and kiss the cross, or we're going to chop your head off. And remarkably, Jews, one after another, talking about the most simple Jews, not big scholars, not big mystics, gave up their life. And heads rolled in the hundreds of thousands. And it's hard to imagine it today. And I don't mean, God forbid, to put it down. But the damage, the hurt, the trauma that the Jewish community in Poland, which was basically all of Europe, this was European Jewry, had after these pogroms, 1648, 1649, was in a certain way harder than the Holocaust. It was more damaging to the Jewish community than the Holocaust. It's hard to imagine that, what could be good about the Holocaust? But there were certain silver linings in the way the Holocaust happened. Number one, the Holocaust didn't touch all the Jewish community. There's certain areas of Jewish life that were kept intact, even with the Holocaust. Another good thing that happened after the Holocaust, that Jews left. Nobody went back home. Nobody went back to live in Poland after the Holocaust. After the Holocaust, you knew we're moving on with life. We're going to Israel, we're going to America. And that was very cathartic. It helped the Jews turn a page and to start. 1648, 1649, the Chmielnicki pogroms, Jews stayed, the survivors. Talking about bare bones, who's surviving? How many Jews survived already? Everybody stayed put. So the trauma and the smoke of the destruction of the massacre, they lived in it, they breathed it for the next few decades. And this event just shattered the Jews. They felt neglected by God. This was considered the worst tragedy since the destruction of the Holy Temple 1,500 years earlier. And this is really up there with the Holocaust. It was less Jews, it was a few 100,000 Jews, but percentage-wise, if I'm not mistaken, they murdered more Jews percentage-wise than Hitler did. Unbelievable, just totally decimated Ashkenazi Jewry. If any of us are Ashkenazi Jews, we're the descendants of the bare remnants of the few survivors from these massacres. Why are we getting into all this? Jewish life came to a certain standstill. Jews continued being Jews. Jews went to synagogue. Jews made a Seder. And Jews lit the Hanukkah menorah. But the Jews felt so disconnected and so hurt and so torn. And the Jews were just kind of lifeless. Okay, but it gets a little bit worse. One last little story, and we'll leave this dark chapter of Jewish history. A few years later, the Jews of Poland, which are so distraught and so they're dying for good news. Give me a little positivity. They start getting news from Turkey that the Messiah has arrived. There was a guy, his name was Shabtai Tzvi, very charismatic individual, very knowledgeable person, and he claimed to be the Messiah. And he said, I'm the Messiah, and I'm here to usher the Jewish world into the Messianic era. And the Jews of Poland especially were so desperate for good news, they bought into Shabtai Tzvi, hook, line, and sinker. They were totally bought in. And all the telltale signs were there that Shabtai Tzvi was a fraud, an imposter, a charlatan. We know what Mashiach is supposed to look like, and he violated all the rules. In general, it's pretty easy to tell somebody's a Messiah or not. It's happened, a lot of times in Jewish history, somebody showed up and said, I'm the Messiah. And it's pretty simple. We have the guidelines. And if they don't match it, it's very quick to see. But the Jews wanted to believe in it. It's like a scam that's too good to be true, but you don't want it to be false. So you just believe in it. You fool yourself. That's what happened. And for about 15 years, the Jewish community worldwide, but especially in Europe, is swept up in this messianic fervor, and they're excited and they feel all this excitement. God is finally coming to our salvation after such a bad. And eventually, Shabtai Tzvi is exposed as the fraud that he is. What happened? He was arrested by, I believe it was in Turkey. What was that? He was arrested by the Ottomans, and the king, I believe it was the king, the king gave him an ultimatum. The Sultan gave an ultimatum: convert to Islam, or I'll kill you. And you know what Shabtai Tzvi did? Converted to Islam. Ooh, can you imagine the Jews in Poland get that letter? They were getting like weekly updates, letters from Turkey with all the good news and what's happening. And Shabtai Tzvi had quite a following. It's the history is really fascinating. How this guy was able to take the Jewish world, and play with them. And it just shows you how there was a lack of leadership. There's who were the sages? Where was Moses? Where was Mordechai? Who were the big people who were supposed to be there to help the Jews? Nobody was there. As high as the highs were, that's how low the lows were. The Jews came crashing down. Their last hope just came crashing down. This happened in the 1670s. Those 50 years following the Chmielnicki pogroms, and especially after Shabtai Tzvi's false Messiah gig, it crushed the Jews. And today we look back and we say that was a time when the Jewish life, the Jewish spirit was in a comatose state. Not dead, but coma. Not good either. really not good. And what God did was, God sent a very unique soul, born exactly 50 years after the Chelmeniski pogrom started in the year 1698, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov means a master of the good name. This child, people saw in him, in the youngest of ages, people saw that this is a special child, destined for greatness. And he became the leader of the Jewish world in the decades that followed. Very, very powerful story of how the Baal Shem Tov emerged. He was born to parents in their very old age, in their 90s. Elijah the prophet came to their parents and told them they're going to have a special child. His father died when he was 3 years old, the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov, even before his bar mitzvah, got involved in a group of mystics, of secret mystics. And everybody saw in him that he is a very special Jew. Just like Moses, the Torah tells us that from the moment he was born, people saw a certain energy, a radiance. The Torah says the entire house filled with light. And they saw the same thing about the Baal Shem Tov. And already from the age of 13, right when he was bar mitzvah, he became the leader of a group of hidden mystics, of tzaddikim, alive then in the early 1700s. And he began the revival of the Jewish people in Poland and throughout the entire Jewish world. What the Baal Shem Tov did was he took a part of Torah that was not here in this world yet, called Chasidism, and he started the process of revealing it. Now, he literally did pretty close to basically taking, maybe even more radical, than taking the deepest parts of Torah and starting to feed it to the Jews, bringing an energy back into the Jews. Now, why did he do that? Because it was desperate times. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And they need to take the deepest parts of Torah to shake up the Jewish spirit, pull it out of its coma, and start reviving it, start bringing it back to life. And that's where the story of Chasidus, that came to save the Jews and bring that spirit back into the Jewish world. And there's no question, if you look even at the history of the culture of the Jews, there's a very clear shift that happens with the Baal Shem Tov, with the advent of Chasidus, which is very interesting. It brought an energy back. Even today, the fact that all Jews, even something as simple as this, all Jews sing in synagogues today. Who doesn't sing? Everybody sings. Song was brought back. He preached to love a fellow Jew. God loves every Jew, like a father, like a father who has only one child. God wants the heart. God wants sincerity. God doesn't need big brains. God is looking for the sincerity of the Jewish heart. This is what he preached. He brought Jews a sense of love, a sense of passion, a sense of connection again. The Baal Shem Tov reveals Chasidus, as radical as it is. And a later Hasidic Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, who authored the Tanya, the founder of the Chabad movement, he explained what Chasidus was. What's this whole idea that the Baal Shem Tov revealed Chasidus? He says like this. He gave a story. He gave an analogy. Somebody once asked him, what's this business that all of a sudden Chasidus is coming out into the open? This was the analogy that the Alter Rebbe gave. He gave a story of a kingdom, a king. And this is a king who's in a long line of succession of kings over a kingdom. And he has one son, a crown prince. And this crown prince is going to die. That's the story. He got very sick, got very ill. And he's deteriorating. And this king brings in doctors from all over the place. The world's greatest professionals. How could we heal the crown prince? This is who's going to take over the monarchy. But nobody could find the cure until there's one doctor that comes and says there is a cure, but it's going to be impossible for you to do it. There's a very rare gem, a very rare stone that is only found in a very faraway place in certain mountains on the other side of the world. And if you take that stone and it has certain minerals, certain properties, and if you crush it and grind it to a fine dust, you mix it with water and you pour it down your son's throat, there's a chance of survival here. The king says, so what type of stone is it? We'll shake heaven and earth. We'll try to find the stone. And this professional, this doctor tells them what type of stone it is. And they do a search. And they discover that actually the king owns one such stone in the royal treasury. What's the stone? The only problem is that the stone is this main gem on the crown of the king. And if you take out this gem, the whole crown, you got to break the whole crown. And you're taking the stone that represents the very kingship, the very leadership of this kingdom, and you're going to crush it and grind it to a dust. So they told the king, should we do it? And the king says, what good is my crown? What good is my status as a king if the crown prince is going to die? If he dies, then it's all over. He says, take my crown, take that jewel, crush it, mix it with water, and maybe it will help the sun. And the story goes, they did that. They destroyed the crown. They took this very stone that represents the very essence of the king's identity. They crushed it. They fed to the crown prince. Most of the liquid goes, pours out of the mouth and goes on the floor and gets wasted, but a little bit goes in and revives him. And the Alter Rebbe said, that is the exact same thing. That's the story of Chasidus. The Jewish people were in a very dangerous place, in a coma. It wasn't healthy. Something had to happen over here. And God took the deepest parts of Torah, the jewel, the crown jewel of Torah, and made it available for the Jews. And that's what Chassidus is. But one more little insight into Chassidus. Let's read text 4. This is a text from the Baal Shem Tov, page 245. And where are we holding over here? Larry, we're up to you. Page 245, text 4.
Rosh Hashanah of the year 5507 to 1746. My soul ascended to the higher world. I rose level after level until I reached the chamber of Mashiach. I asked Mashiach, when will the master come? He answered, by this you will know, and your teachings will become known and revealed throughout the world, and your well springs will be spread to the outside.
This is the second element to what Chassidus is. The Baal Shem Tov did something in Rosh Hashanah that during his prayer, he had an ascent of his soul. His soul ascended to the higher worlds. I can't tell you what it looks like because I've never done it. My davening at best, I have presence of mind to understand what I'm saying, besides saying mumbling words. The Baal Shem Tov, he had a spiritual journey. And he went to the chamber of Mashiach and he says, when is the Messiah going to come? And Mashiach says, Mashiach coming is dependent on the spreading of Chassidus. The well springs of Chassidus have to be spread to the outside. More Jews have to study it. This is the secret sauce that's going to bring the Jewish world and the entire world to its destiny of the Messianic era. And this is really, if you want to say, the Torah on the one hand is so ancient. It's being developed over so many years. Chassidus is the one part of Torah which is so unique that it's a fresh development. It's really the story of our times. So, dear friend, we are wrapping up over here. We're going to be concluding now. We spoke about Kabbalah. We spoke about Chasidus. We did not have a chance to do the taste of Kabbalah. If any of you want, maybe do a bonus class. I offered this morning's class. If you want, this text that we read, right? Lewis read it. This cryptic text of Kabbalah, it'll take us about 45 minutes to an hour to unpack what exactly is happening here and to start gaining an appreciation of this Kabbalistic text. If any of you want, we can maybe do that for a bonus class, maybe next week, Wednesday. If there's interest, I'll send out an email. We'll see if there's interest for a real actual taste of real authentic Kabbalistic learning. But at this point, I want to conclude this course like this. The goal of this course was to take the whole Torah, and all of us have studied pieces of Torah and heard terms and titles like Mishnah and Talmud and Medrash, and to bring it a little bit closer to home. What is Torah? How does Torah function? How does Torah work? And to make sense of it. So my hope and prayer is that this course, this past 6 weeks, have given us all a certain inspiration, a certain empowerment, and a certain connection, a certain renewed connection to the Torah. And what I want to share with you is that I really hope that these 6 weeks, and now as we conclude the 6-week course, is not the end of a journey, but I hope it's the beginning of a journey for you. One of the beautiful things of Judaism, which is so unique from any other religion, is that all other religions were created in a model, a hierarchy, that only the aristocrats and only the clergy were allowed to study the teachings. And the common folk were not allowed to access the teachings of the religion. They all had to be stupid. It started from the Greek society. Everybody has to be stupid besides the aristocrats. The Christian societies work this way. That's why the Bible is always in Latin. We don't want anybody to understand the Bible. Only the priest should know the Bible. And we'll tell you what the word of God is. And Judaism was so revolutionary, especially in the older societies. Everybody has to know. Everybody has to study. Children have to have access. It was really revolutionary. It was part of the spirit from the very beginning, from Mount Sinai, that Moses said, this Torah doesn't belong to any one of us. It belongs to every single Jew. This is your Torah. It's my Torah. Everybody must study. And what I want to encourage you is that I want you to take a moment. On page 266, we have here the 8 genres that we've explored. We've studied Tanakh. We've explored Midrash, Talmud, Halacha, Musar, Hakira, Kabbalah, and Chasidus. I want you to think, what's one part of Torah that specifically enticed me, where I felt, I would like to dig in more. I would love to study that a little bit more. And I want to encourage you, I'm going to be sending out an email, God willing, tomorrow, with one book recommendation, one text. I'm not going to give you an adaptation. I want to give you a real, authentic text of the Jewish library that's translated in English. And I want you to choose, what's one book that I could study, maybe 5 minutes a day. I could make it part of my schedule to study this, maybe once a week. And it's not a class. It's just a Jew studying Torah. This is your Torah. Make it a part of your life. This is at the essence of being a Jew. And let it inspire you. And one more thing before you go. With that spirit, I want to show this to you. I'm also going to send this out in the link. Okay, this is something which is really, really amazing. There is a weekly publication that's called Chayenu. It's a little pamphlet that looks like this. And you can also get it on app on your phone or on a tablet. And it's a weekly and even daily Torah study. It has it's like a smorgasbord of stuff that you could study. There's the daily Torah portion, there's daily Tanya, there's daily Jewish law, there's Talmud, anything that you would ever want to study from all the genres that we've explored. They have this in this booklet. And it's so well done. And you can get a subscription. And what they really have over here is they have that for the first 3 months. It's a weekly publication. They'll give you a 3-month free trial to check out the publication and see if you like it before you need to pay. 3 months, every single week they send you Torah study for that week. It's easy. You could bring it along with you. You're waiting at a doctor's appointment. You can study a little bit of Torah. And even better, in honor of this course, Chayenu is offering a 25% discount for a subscription. So the first 3 months are free, which means that for how many weeks is that? 12 weeks. You could try out this weekly Torah pamphlet. And if you want to continue, you have 25% off for your annual subscription. And this is if you could get into this, it's life-changing in a way that's accessible, it's bite-sized. And I really want to encourage you to try it. Incorporate real Torah study into your lifestyle. Not that we go to a class, but on a very personal level. I'm going to send out to you the link for this, some book recommendations and a link. And I hope that that's going to be our little resolution, a little inspiration from this course. And with that, dear friends, it's 9:03. We're going to conclude. I want to thank you all for joining. This is a wonderful journey. I'm so happy that all of you were with it. And God willing, to many more, to much more, studying together, inspiration together, and the good times together. So take care to you all, and it's soon Pesach. I want to wish you all as a traditional greeting goes, a kosher and freilichen Pesach, a kosher and a joyous Pesach, stress-free Pesach. And we'll see you all very, very soon, God willing.
Thank you, thank you, Rabbi. This was,
Oh, thank you, Bernie. Take care.
it was fabulous.
We've enjoyed
We've enjoyed it. Thank you.
We'll see you all
Thanks,
soon.
Rabbi.
Take care, friend. Have a good evening.